Chapter 1. The Ground Floor. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 46 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that great architecture could change the world. Not because of aesthetics, not because of fame, because I had seen it when I was 9 years old and watched my father rebuild a collapsed church after a tornado wiped through central Kansas. He wasn't famous. He didn't have awards. But he stood there in the rain, holding a rolled-up blueprint in one hand and a hammer in the other, and he brought people back home. That's when I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't care about skyscrapers in Dubai or minimalist glass cubes. I wanted to build things that mattered. By 27, I had a master's degree in urban design and a job at Braxton & Lowe, the oldest and most respected architecture firm in Chicago. By 32, I was the youngest associate in their history. By 38, I had my name on one of their flagship buildings, the Dalton Children's Pavilion, and a partnership track offer. That's also when I met Julian Cross. Julian was everything I wasn't. Where I was quiet, Julian was loud. Where I was methodical, he was flamboyant. He wore designer suits to site visits. He drank $80 cocktails. He pitched with charisma that made investors lean forward, nodding before he even showed them a render. But here's the thing, we worked well together. I knew materials, systems, and constraints. He knew how to sell a dream. He called me the engineer who could make emotion structural. I called him the poet with a platinum card. We became partners on everything. When Julian was promoted to executive director at 41, he pulled me up with him. He even gave me 12% equity in the new firm he formed under Braxton & Lowe's umbrella, C+M Studio, Cross & Mercer. It was a handshake deal, but I trusted him. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? Chapter 2. The Opportunity. Everything changed the day the Orem project came into our office. It wasn't just a building. It was a legacy. The city of Chicago had approved a $2.1 billion investment into the South Shore waterfront, aiming to build a cultural and civic complex that would include a public performing arts center, low-income housing integrated with mixed-use retail, a landmark museum dedicated to Black American history, and a transportation hub connecting 4 underserved neighborhoods. They called it Orem, Latin for gold, the rebirth of something neglected for decades. Only 5 firms were shortlisted to pitch for the design and oversight contract. We were one of them. Julian called me that night. His voice was shaking. Dan, if we win this, we're not just architects anymore. We're shaping Chicago's soul. He wasn't wrong. I worked 17-hour days for 3 weeks. I didn't just design buildings. I walked the neighborhoods, interviewed residents, studied wind patterns, cultural histories, zoning failures. I crafted a blueprint that was equal parts practical and poetic. It was, without a doubt, the best work of my life. Julian presented it to the city panel, using his charm like a scalpel. And we won. The entire Orem contract, estimated at $312 million in architecture, urban planning, and project management fees, over a 9-year execution period. It was a career-defining moment. I celebrated with my team that night. Julian didn't show up. He texted at midnight. Something came up. Drinks next week. You deserve it. 3 weeks later, I was called into a private meeting with the Braxton & Lowe board. Julian was already seated. So was Amanda Bresson, our head of legal, and Miles Carter, one of the managing partners. Julian wouldn't look at me. Amanda handed me a packet. 46 pages. Termination. Revocation of equity. Severance agreement. Standard NDA. An offer of $400,000 to walk away quietly. I didn't understand. Is this a joke? I asked. Julian spoke first. There have been concerns raised about proprietary work being used in the Orem proposal. Unreviewed renderings. Unauthorized design modules. What are you talking about? I asked. It's not personal, Miles cut in. But the board has decided it's best to move forward with new leadership. I stared at Julian. He didn't blink. Chapter 3. The Fall. Over the next 72 hours, my world disintegrated. I was locked out of company systems. My work email returned, user does not exist. Colleagues stopped answering texts. My office was emptied by interns while I was escorted out by building security. Not for misconduct, just procedure. I couldn't speak publicly about it. The NDA was airtight. One wrong word, and they'd bury me in lawsuits. And worst of all, Julian leaked a press statement crediting himself and 2 junior associates with the Orem concept, claiming I had left the firm to pursue solo opportunities. Friends avoided me. Clients ghosted me. The architecture world whispered, maybe he did plagiarize. Maybe he cracked under pressure. Julian wouldn't do that unless he had a reason. I stayed in my apartment. For weeks. Didn't answer the door. Didn't answer the phone. Didn't eat anything that wasn't microwavable. At night, I drank. During the day, I read design blogs. Watching Julian give interviews on how social responsibility meets modern expressionism in his Orem concept. My concept. He even used my phrase, grounded elegance, without blinking. I didn't want revenge. Not at first. I wanted answers. But you know what happens when you wait too long for closure? You realize some people won't give it to you. So you start building something else. Chapter 4, Foundation for War. The first call I made was to Paul Chin. Paul was a structural engineer I'd worked with for over a decade, brilliant, meticulous, and allergic to politics. He'd gone freelance 2 years ago after his firm was absorbed by a national conglomerate. I asked him if he had time for a personal project. Something small or something spiteful. He asked. Something that will outlive the bastards, I replied. He said he was in. The second call was to Lena Ortiz, former city planner turned community activist. She'd helped me coordinate neighborhood outreach during the early Orem drafts. She picked up on the first ring. I heard what they did, she said. I want to build something real, I said. Not a monument. Not a statement. Something the city actually needs. With or without headlines. Then let's find the land, she said. By the end of the week, I had 3 parcels on the south side under review, none larger than 2 acres, all underused industrial lots forgotten by both investors and politicians. The third call I made, the hardest one, was to journalist Marinu. We hadn't spoken in 4 years. Not since her expose on misappropriated zoning funds had nearly tanked one of my earliest community projects. But she was good, relentless, feared. I don't have evidence yet, I told her. But I have a story, and I think you'll want to be in the room when it unfolds. She didn't say yes. She just asked, where should I meet you? I booked a co-working space under a different name, and I got to work. Chapter 5, Brick by Brick. I named the project quietly, South Core. It wouldn't be a company. Not yet. Not a nonprofit either. Just an idea with a file folder, a bank account, and a purpose. Restore function to one abandoned block of Chicago's South Side. Without politics, without press releases. Lena handled zoning exploration and community feedback. Paul drew up rough feasibility diagrams. I started crafting a phased development plan.
Phase 1, modular housing units with solar integration. Phase 2, an urban greenhouse and shared kitchen cooperative. Phase 3, a small tech skills training center, run evenings and weekends. The goal wasn't beauty. It was utility. But I couldn't help it. The elevations looked good. I slept better. Drank less. Even started jogging again. But Julian wasn't gone. Not really. I found out from Marin. She called during her second week of digging. They're prepping a story, she said. Julian's pushing the city council to accelerate groundbreaking on Orem. Says delays are costing taxpayers. But here's the twist. The updated plan removes most of the affordable housing. I didn't answer. They're replacing it with luxury condos, she added, tucked behind public access retail. So it was true. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. He hadn't just stolen my designs. He'd gutted their purpose. Lena was livid. We're doing this faster, she said. If we can get South Core Phase 1 permitted before they break ground on Orem's revision, we can challenge the zoning. Stop the dominoes. We spent the next 2 weeks working 16-hour days. Paul refined the build envelope. I rewrote budget projections. Lena hosted 6 community meetings in 10 days. One morning, I showed up to the co-working space and found Marin waiting outside. She looked different, energized. I got a source, she said. Inside Braxton and Lowe. She handed me a USB. Confidential staff memos. Early design drafts. Meeting minutes. All time-stamped. All yours. Inside that folder were 37 PDF files. One of them showed my exact original Orem master plan, 6 months before Julian publicly presented it. That was the match. Now I had the fire. Chapter 6. Leverage. I spent that night printing every one of the 37 documents. I didn't trust cloud backups. Not with this. I read each page twice, cross-referenced file dates with my old calendar entries. It was all there, designs, notes, presentation decks, all created by me and scrubbed of my name. The worst file wasn't even mine. It was an internal memo from Amanda Bresson to Julian, recommending my termination before the Orem contract was secured. She wrote, "He's too grounded in legacy values. Visionary optics require clean narrative ownership. Suggests strategic displacement before final bid delivery." Strategic displacement. I'd been erased by committee. I scanned that page, emailed it to Marin with no subject. 10 minutes later she replied, "Jesus Christ. Can I publish this?" "Not yet," I wrote. "Let me move first." Chapter 7. Design Confidential. By Thursday, South Core Phase 1 was ready. Paul had structural review approval. Lena had zoning support from 2 aldermen. I filed permits. Quietly. Under a newly formed LLC. Marin started writing the story, not a hit piece, but a timeline. Design authorship. Leadership decisions. Financial trail. No accusations? Just documentation. She scheduled it to drop the day before Orem's official groundbreaking. But I had one more card to play. I called Randall Koch. Randall was the last person I ever thought I'd reach out to, head of a private development fund, one of those money guys who wore Patagonia vests and invested in community wellness when it fit brand alignment. But he owed me. 10 years ago, I'd redesigned a campus for one of his startups after the original plan was botched. I made him look good. He remembered. "I need bridge capital," I told him. "Enough to show viability. Not to finish. Just to start." He asked for a number. I gave him a number. He laughed. Then he said, "I'll wire half today." It was enough. We broke ground on South Core that weekend. For workers, rented backhoe, news cameras nowhere in sight. But Braxton and Lowe noticed. On Monday, I got an email from Amanda Bresson. "Mr. Mercer, it has come to our attention that you are developing a residential complex in South Shore that bears structural resemblance to proprietary designs previously submitted under NDA. We request immediate clarification on your activities." I didn't reply. Chapter 8. The Shadow Studio. Marin's article went live on Tuesday at 7 a.m. By 10 a.m., it had 90,000 reads. By 2 p.m., it was trending on Twitter. By nightfall, the Chicago Tribune had picked it up. Julian issued a statement. Cold. Corporate. C+M Studios categorically denies all allegations regarding authorship of the Orem project. We remain committed to integrity and visionary urban renewal. The comments were brutal. Architects, students, even former Braxton employees. They remembered my work. They recognized the theft. But the real story came later that week. The Chicago Zoning Commission announced a review of the Orem plan, citing concerns of intent drift from original proposal. Translation: the city smelled blood. Meanwhile, I got a visit from someone unexpected. Jacob Torres. My old junior partner. He showed up at the South Core site in boots and a windbreaker. I want in, he said. I've been watching what you're doing. Julian's unraveling. Half the office is scared to speak. The other half's sending out resumes. What do you want? I asked. To build something real. And maybe fix what I didn't speak up about before. I handed him a clipboard. Start with load assessments. Chapter 9, City of Ghosts. Julian was panicking. He started emailing former clients. Sent a press kit to every architectural blog in the Midwest. Launched a VR tour of the redesigned Orem campus, complete with voiceover. But none of it landed. Because now people knew. Knew that the man speaking on those videos hadn't drawn a single wall section. Knew that the affordable housing was gone. That the museum budget was slashed. That the South Core version, small, underfunded, quiet, was already real. Marin's second piece dropped 2 weeks later. This one had quotes. One from a former Braxton intern who watched me sketch the original roofline. One from a council aide who overheard Amanda and Julian discussing how to bury legacy assets. And one from a city vendor who supplied Julian with a fabricated invoice for a consulting fee that was never rendered. Now it was fraud. Now it was legal. Chapter 10, Collapse and Concrete. The lawsuit arrived by courier. Cease and desist. Demand to halt all construction. Allegation: unauthorized use of proprietary architectural systems. Paul laughed out loud when he read it. They're describing a curtain wall. Lena didn't laugh. It's a delay tactic. If we respond wrong, they can freeze us for months. I sent it straight to our lawyer. He filed a countersuit. Defamation. Misrepresentation. Intentional interference with a client. And then we filed something else, a 64-page ethics complaint with the American Institute of Architects. We attached the timeline. We attached the files. We attached the memo from Amanda. Julian went dark. Then he vanished. 3 days later, Braxton and Lowe released a statement. Julian Cross was no longer employed at the firm. I stood outside the South Core greenhouse shell that night, watching the solar rigging team finish wiring. Jacob stood next to me, hands in his pockets. Think he'll come back? I shook my head. Not this time. Chapter 11, Public Blueprint. I hadn't planned to speak publicly. But sometimes silence is a cage, and after Marin published the third article, the one that laid out not just the theft, but the cultural cost of Orem's betrayal, something shifted. Community groups invited me to speak. Architecture students wrote letters. Even the Chicago Tribune ran an op-ed. The man behind the blueprint. So I spoke. Once. I gave a talk at the South Shore Public Library, standing under exposed rafters and next to construction renderings duct taped to drywall. I didn't mention Julian. Not once. I talked about purpose. About how cities are shaped by who gets heard. And how good design should serve need before narrative. There were 65 people in the room. Someone filmed it. By Monday, it had over 300,000 views. Chapter 12, The Jury of the Market. Retailers called. Community banks called. 3 mid-sized construction firms offered discounted services to join the South Core project. Randall texted me. You're trending on architecture Reddit. Never thought I'd write that sentence. That week, Braxton and Lowe lost 4 contracts. 2 universities dropped them from consideration for new campus work. The AI issued a formal censure pending investigation. Julian hadn't responded to the complaint. Because he was gone. Nobody knew where. Amanda Bresson resigned quietly the following week. Chapter 13, Face to Face. It was a cold March evening when I saw him again. I was walking through Riverbend Plaza, the new mixed-use site I'd helped design a decade ago. Julian was standing at a bench. Alone. No coat. Just a scarf and a coffee cup. He looked older. He nodded when he saw me. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't plan to." Saturday. I lost everything. I didn't speak. I never wanted to cut you out, Dan. But I saw a different future. I thought if I could just guide the ship. You threw me overboard. He flinched. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked. He shook his head. "You didn't even believe in the work. You just believed in the applause." He looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded and walked away. Chapter 14, The Build That Broke Them. Southcore Phase 1 opened that summer. The ribbon cutting was modest. A few local news crews. Lena's kids handing out lemonade. One of Paul's interns gave a speech about thermal efficiency. But the line to tour the units wrapped around the block. By fall, the greenhouse was operational. The tech center took its first 18 students. And applications for Phase 2 began pouring in. Marin's final article was titled, "Built to Endure, the Architect Who Refused to Be Erased." A photo of me standing with a hard hat under one arm, and Lena and Paul on either side. The caption read, "What starts in silence sometimes echoes the loudest." Chapter 15, Reclaiming the Skyline. 6 months later, I received an invitation. The AI National Conference. They wanted me to keynote. I almost declined. But Lena insisted. I stood on a stage in Boston, in front of 3,000 people, and told the story of Southcore, and the version of Orem that never got built. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. People knew. Afterward, 3 young architects approached me. One said, "You proved it's possible to fight back." I smiled. "No. I proved it's possible to rebuild better." That fall, the Southcore model was adopted by 2 other cities. Paul expanded into adaptive reuse projects. Lena won a civic planning award. Me? I kept drawing. Not for clients. Not for revenge. For people. Because design isn't revenge. It's revelation. And sometimes, the best way to respond to theft is to build what they never could.